Welcome to BioIT World's Trends from the Trenches podcast, your insider's look at the science, technology, and executive trends driving the life sciences. I'm Allison Proffitt, editor of BioIT World, and this episode is hosted by Stan Gloss, founder of BioTeam, a life sciences IT consulting company at the intersection of science, data, and technology.
Hi, Susan. Thank you so much for joining me on my podcast today. I've really been looking forward to talking with you. You know, we've known each other for over 3 years now, even before the pandemic. And so what I was hoping to do today is kind of run through the last 3 years and talk about some of the work that we've done together. I'm not sure a lot of people know all the work that goes on behind the NIH. So maybe just as a quick intro, you could kind of share a little bit about your background and how you got to the position that you're at the NIH.
Absolutely. Thanks, Stan. It's just wonderful to be here today and to speak with you. We've had a wonderful journey together, and I've enjoyed working with you so much and all of my colleagues at BioTeam. I had this sort of circuitous route to where I am today. I started off in computational chemistry as a PhD student, looking at reactive flux in small molecules that have excited states. I made a change from computational chemistry to computational biology as a postdoctoral student at Israel at the Hebrew University, working with Benny Gerber on understanding energy flow in large macromolecule systems like proteins and protein water systems. And from that, I took a position at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, continuing that work in large macromolecule studies, protein dynamics, neutron scattering for structure determination, DNA, RNA, protein structures. And while I was there, I got involved a little bit with the Department of Energy and their bioenergy research centers. And so I formally joined the DOE as a program officer to work on data strategies for biological systems, particularly energy and the environment. And I really fell in love with the work. I fell in love with thinking about data sharing strategies and policies, and also in setting up systems for researchers interested in bioenergy in particular, and systems that would understand the interactions between microbes and plants and the environment. So the DOE Systems Biology Knowledge Base was a significant part of the work that I stood up and developed while at the Department of Energy. And as I know, KBase, as we call it, is still in place today and going quite well and really serving the original goals and even extending those goals for the Department of Energy and the Office of Biological and Environmental Research, BER. I then joined the team at NIH and the National Institute of General Medical Sciences to lead a division in biomedical technology and computational biology and data science, really focusing on new paradigms for developing technology, new ways to fund researchers in computational biology and data sciences. It was a wonderful time, but while I was at NIGMS and working with our director, Dr. John Lorsch, I got involved in BD2K, Big Data to Knowledge, and in the Scientific Data Council. And I started to migrate more towards the Office of the Director, where I am today, as we developed the Strategic Plan for Data Science. And then I was a detail there at the Office of the Director to help set up the Office of Data Science Strategy while we looked to recruit our Associate Director of Data Science. And eventually I was acting in that role, and then I just turned into the Associate Director of Data Science. And it's been a wonderful opportunity for me to learn much more about NIH and the research that we're doing, to work with many, many colleagues at NIH. And we work with over 200 colleagues in a number of working groups and teams to really realize the vision and the goal of the Strategic Plan for Data Science, taking into account everything we learned from BD2K and really building upon that foundation. So it's a long-winded response to say that, I feel like we're making a big difference here at NIH in data science.
So maybe you could just share with us the mission of the Office of Data Science.
Absolutely. So we are in the division of, I have to get the acronym out because I always forget what it stands for, DPCIPC, the Division of Program Coordination, Planning, and Strategic Initiatives. So most people know DPCIPC because they are the common fund, but there are actually many offices in DPCIPC, all of which have a general theme, which is to coordinate and really help catalyze transformative science across our 27 institutes and centers. So our work here is, of course, to provide catalytic transformation of data science. We work on activities that would be of benefit to multiple institutes and centers. As you'll see from some of the things I'll talk about, our role really is to provide a way to think about a modernized, fair, and care data ecosystem. And so I help do that by working with, as I said, over 200 colleagues here at NIH.
And most of the work you do spans across all of the NIH, correct?
Oh, yes. Most of the work that I do is of benefit to all of the institutes and centers. Occasionally, I'll drill down and work with a particular IC on a particular topic. For example, we are working on bringing data science to tribal nations. And so our partnership is really focused with NIMHD, the Minority Health and Health Disparities Institute, and NIGMS and their NARCH program, and a little bit NHGRI and the genomics initiatives that they work with tribal communities.
That's fantastic. In 2018 is really when we started working with you. And at that point, you were developing the NIH Strategic Plan for Data Science that actually ran between 2018 and 2022. So what led up to the development of the strategic plan, and what needs did the NIH recognize that spurred the strategic plan's creation?
That is such a great question. If folks remember way back, I think starting as early as 2016, maybe even before, was the Big Data to Knowledge program. And in 2018, as Big Data to Knowledge program was coming to the end of its funding horizon, we were looking at the impact and the accomplishments, and importantly, what's next for data science. We learned a lot from the BD2K programs, the centers, the training efforts, the Common Fund, Data Commons. So we thought about what should we do strategically in data science. And as a collaborative effort with the Scientific Data Council, we thought about what were our top priorities. And we looked at 5 main themes. The first theme was around data infrastructure, and this was really brought in a little bit by the STRIDES initiative. What do we really need to create in order to envision large-scale data analytics for the analysis of data that would be in the petabyte range? So you can only have really effectively petabyte-scale data analysis for large communities in a cloud-based system. So really thinking about how can we leverage STRIDES, how can we build upon STRIDES? Are there other activities that we need to think about in data infrastructure that would allow us to take advantage of the enormous amount of data that NIH is creating? We also wanted to create fair data, supporting the creation, the curation, the storage, and the analysis of data, creating methods to promote finding data, promoting the FAIR principles, findability, accessibility, interoperability, and reusability. We outlined a way and a means for which data or platforms could be made interoperable, and also a way to support data repositories and knowledge bases as resources to maximize data reuse. We also wanted to think about the tools and the analytics that support data science. We want to support sustainable software and also enhance the existing NIH software that we have already supported by basically hardening that software, bringing it to the cloud or bringing it to many users. We wanted to leverage methods from aligned fields such as mathematics and physics and economics to really support software development for NIH research. In addition, we have programs that we want to support for creating a strong and diverse scientific workforce for biomedical research. I mentioned our goals to enhance data science in American Indian, Native, Alaskan populations, but also in underrepresented populations and communities of diversity, as well as other efforts to enhance training of researchers in cloud or other technologies. And finally, our last theme for our strategic plan was to create sustainable data policies, such as the most impactful policy that we've made in a long time, the data management and sharing policy, which will go into effect on January 25 of 2023, so less than 1 year away.
That's amazing. So maybe what we can do is, I would like to talk about a few of the projects that were on in that strategic plan, one of which is in 2019, we worked on a project to discover core needs for the data ecosystem for NIH. What was that project and what did we learn from that project?
So the work that BioTeam done was really informative. It was a basics needs assessment. It allowed NIH to listen and to learn from each and every one of our ICs, as BioTeam worked with every single IC, including CSR, not NIC, but CSR, our Center for Scientific Review, CIT, our Center for Information Technology, as well as other offices, to learn about their critical needs and challenges cross-cut on a series of user personas so that we could understand from the use cases in each of these institutes and centers what are some of the critical challenges or needs in data science. From that work, that basic needs assessment, by the way, that's something I learned from my time at DOE. We were able to develop strategies for plans, for example, for Researcher Auth Services, as well as for the NIH Cloud Platform Interoperability Program, as well as new ideas that we've just been laying the foundation for in terms of data discovery or search. So these lay the foundations for the work that we have been doing over the past 3 years that have been really, really impactful.
Well, that's terrific. It sounds like the strategic plan actually grew as you learned.
Oh, it definitely grew. Yes. The strategic plan was written at a fairly high level, but we had to fill in all the details, all the implementation, all the nitty gritty of what actually are we going to do and how are we actually going to accomplish that. So there was a lot of work that, needed to be filled in. And the work that BioTeam did on that basic needs assessment was the first step in really making that sort of lofty strategic plan actually a functional implementation plan.
Yeah. So another project that we worked on with you is something called the Researcher Auth Services, RAS project. How is that project helping NIH?
So that's an amazing project. And I have to say, it's really taken off. I'm so pleased. And I'm going to just shout out right now to Rebecca Rosen, who is our project owner, and now Chris Sweet, who sits in our Office of Data Science Strategy, who is the project manager for Researcher Auth Services. And these two folks make the magic happen, that with our colleagues at CIT and Deloitte. So Researcher Auth Services, it's a cloud-based authentication and authorization service that facilitates access to NIH-controlled access data. While it is, of course, in the beginning, mostly genomics data, there's no stipulation that the data has to be genomics. Any controlled access data would fit into the scope of work for RAS, as we call it. And many of our participating ICs and systems are actually working with RAS. What RAS does is it provides a standardized method for accessing data and for logging and auditing these accesses. So you come into basically a portal, and through that, you're able to access your login credentials across many systems. So it's essentially a single sign-on is what we like to say. It works by linking your researcher identities with access privileges and layers of security, primarily through ERA Commons. So if you have an ERA Commons identity, or a login.gov identity, you're able to log into RAS, and then you'll be credentialed across a number of systems, and I'm just going to rattle off some of them. They include our RADX Data Hub. We're working to include Recover Data Core and data repositories. Our NIAID TB data portal, the Cardiovascular Development Data Resource Center from NHLBI, as well as LumpMap and HeartsMap, as well as the cell programming database from NIMH, and of course the Cancer Research Data Commons. We're working with NCATS for the N3C, for IDASH from Child Health, from NIA's Alzheimer's data storage, NIGADS, and then of course the big ones, Anvil, Biodata Catalyst, Common Fund Data Ecosystem, Kids First, and Cancer Data Research Commons. So there's a number of systems that are participating in RAS, and I hear that every day we're adding more systems on. So this has been a great success for NIH, and certainly I'm pleased that my office is able to help support this.
Well, that's terrific. It sounds like that pretty much goes right to the heart of making data fair, huh?
Oh, most definitely. Our goal is that, researchers will be able to log into any system that they would be interested in, and then have access to the data across multiple systems that they've already gone through the DAC approval process for. So you don't have to, re-authenticate. You have all the data readily at your hands that you are able to see, and then work in the platform of choice for the analytics. There's still a lot to be done. It's not a done deal. There's a lot of work. Some of it's policy and some of it's technology, but I'd say we're making good progress.
Well, right along the data line from there, we've also done quite a bit of work on data standards. And I know that we've been working with you on FAIR data, and that's a pretty significant effort at NIH data standards, right?
Oh my goodness, yes. We have been doing quite a bit of work on data standards and data policies in terms of what actually should we do for recommending standards. How do we instantiate that into our data management and sharing policy? So one thing I will note, because I think it will be of interest to the group, is that the data management and sharing policy does have or will soon make public a template for researchers to submit their data management sharing plan. And in that template, you will talk about the data that you wish to preserve and share, the related tools and software and code that is used to access or manipulate the data, and importantly, the standards. Any of the standards that might be applied to the scientific data, and additionally, data preservation and access and timelines. Do you or will you have a persistent unique identifier? How long will the data be available? Which data repository will you share that data in? Are there any factors for data access and distribution? And finally, how will your plan be monitored and managed, and by whom? So I think that as folks are developing their data management and sharing plan, attention to standards is going to be an important and key point. There are a number of metadata standards that we've been working with across the institutes and centers for data and for software. So I would think that our job is not done, but we are paying a lot of attention to this.
That's terrific. I'd like to actually jump back to something that you said in one of the earlier response about search and finding things. You said that was extended into the strategic plan. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about the initiatives about the searching and finding of data at NIH and the search program.
Yeah, absolutely. There was this is something that's of particular interest to me, and I think to many. We held a workshop this past January, and BioTeam was really impactful in that workshop. They did a pre-landscape analysis. They prepared all that material for the workshop. The workshop was co-chaired by Dr. Stan Ahalt, who's the director of Red Sea Computing Institute, and Dr. Susanna Sansone, who is a professor of data readiness, I love her title, at the engineering science department at Oxford. And what we found is that there were pretty much 6 key points that we really need to think about when we want to think about finding data, building cohorts, or developing knowledge from data. And the first one was that it's very difficult for researchers to actually find and aggregate data from independent sources, multiple independent sources. It's very hard, for example, and this really went to cohort building, it's really hard to find data and build cohorts on patients or the patients that I want to develop from multiple sources. The workshop also noted that data repositories are incredibly important to the NIH mission. And so there was a call out to just ensure the quality and maintenance of these repositories. There's quite an interesting discussion about data diversity, the heterogeneity of data, the approach to reducing heterogeneity of data by attempting to do attempts of harmonization, which in some cases can be done, like when you look at EHR data, but in other cases it's just very, very difficult. So there was a phrase to embrace the inherent diversity of data. Variance can be a blessing, not a curse. So it's something we're really thinking about. There was a lot of discussion about bias in information retrieval and the current technologies that do not correct for bias. This is a big topic in artificial intelligence that we are very much engaged in across NIH. There was really interesting discussions about accurately representing real world with data. So to understand data appropriately, researchers need to really consider multiple facets of equity, including representation and access to information. And there's been a lot of discussion about semantic relationships and semantic search and moving beyond semantic search to account for biology and rethinking ways in which we can query information and non-obvious information. So I think that the workshop, it really did provide a lot for us to think about and chew on. We are digesting all of the reports, and BioTeam constructed a fairly significant report for us based on all of the learnings, the workshop, and the landscape analysis. I suspect going forward, you'll start to see some really interesting pilot studies sponsored not only by ODSS, but by our institutes and potentially more funding opportunities as well in this space. Because the one thing I did hear is that, research into search for biomedical science is very much needed, that just relying on what exists for other fields of commerce or finance or for other sciences may not adequately get to what we need to do to build cohorts and to understand data and to derive knowledge from it.
Right. Wow, that's amazing.
It's a great workshop.
So there's another project called the Generalist Repository Ecosystem Initiative. Can you help me understand, what is that?
Yeah, this is an outcoming both from a pilot that we ran really early. This was actually one of the first things that my office did, was to stand up a pilot with Figshare in 2019 to just understand the scope and scale of researchers' ability to utilize generalist repositories to find, access, and reuse data. And that pilot was quite helpful. It really taught us a lot about the ways in researchers can use generalist repositories to share data and what their challenges were. And to help further solidify our understanding of the challenges, we also held a workshop on the role of generalist repositories to enhance data discoverability and data reuse. As a first stance, NIH strongly does encourage researchers to share data in a repository that's appropriate from the community for which your research is conducted. However, we certainly understand the role and the need for generalist repositories. And so what we wanted to do with the GRAY initiative, which stands for Generalist Repository Ecosystem Initiative, is to provide a more seamless repository ecosystem to allow data and other digital objects that were a result from NIH-funded research to be stored and shared and found in a community setting. So what we hope to have accomplished by this is to have the journals repositories work together to establish potentially consistent metadata, to develop use cases for data sharing, to instantiate, importantly, and most importantly for me, is to instantiate the findability of data across these journals repositories, and then as well to develop training materials to help educate researchers on constructing and sharing data in their repositories, because we want to support the data management and sharing policy. We want to help researchers think about fair data, but to think about it at the beginning of the experiment, and then to work with repositories of choice to get the data there and to be compliant with our policy. I should mention that we have a number of journals repositories we're working with, so I'll rattle off their names, but you should know that the list is not final and that it is growing. So this is not a done deal. There are more repositories to work with, but currently we're working with Dryad, Dataverse, Figshare, Mendeley Data, Open Science Framework, and Vivily. But there certainly will be more in the future. I'm sure of that.
Wow, that's incredible, Susan. It's when I start thinking about your strategic plan, that plan was developed prior to COVID. So then all of a sudden you're in the middle of a strategic plan, you're executing brilliant, and all of a sudden a pandemic drops in the middle of your strategic plan. I'm just curious, what happened with that and how did that impact your plan?
Oh, yeah, it's so funny because I officially onboarded as the Associate Director for Data Science in the fall of 2019. And then COVID hit just a few months after that. So I didn't even have all of our staff hired. And so for the most part of my work in the Office of the Director, I have been working remotely in my home study. So that's been just kind of challenging in and of itself to build a team, to hire people, to have cohesion in the OD in our office, and then to work across all of the institutes and centers. So just that has been hard. But what we learned from COVID really, because we thought we were just doing great in data science, we really patted ourselves on the back. Everything was going well. And then COVID just told us just how much we weren't doing and how challenging it is to really get fair data in the hands of researchers in a timely fashion so that they can find it, access it, and use it. We are nowhere near close to actually accomplishing that goal. But I just want to point out some highlights that have been happening. Some of them have been supported by my office, and some of them are just shiny examples of what can be done. The N3C, the National COVID Cohort Collaborative, and there's significant work on data harmonization of electronic healthcare and related data from all of the CTSAs. And from my office, we supported inclusion of the CTRs along with NIHMS. That harmonization and getting those clinical electronic healthcare related data in the hands of researchers is marvelous. We also piloted some ideas on record linkage, linking data across multiple data platforms in the hopes that we could indicate participants that would be, for example, in all of us in a clinical trial and in the N3C. And that was a successful pilot, but it also told us that we are nowhere close to having in place all the right policies for just, allowing that kind of data aggregation and linkage to happen.
Wow, it sounds like we've learned quite a bit from the last strategic plan, but it as the title of the strategic plan says, 2018 to 2022, it's 2022. Is it time for the next strategic plan? And can maybe you tell us what's on the crystal ball and what you're thinking about the next strategic plan?
I can absolutely do that. You're absolutely right. Our strategic plan only goes until the end of 2022. We need a new strategic plan for 2023 to 2028. I think 5 years is a reasonable amount of time for a strategy for data science, though the field moves so quickly. So we are developing our new strategic plan. I can forecast just a few things because this is an open session, but things that you may hear about in a new strategic plan build a lot upon what we have done, but hopefully go far beyond in terms of really thinking about data infrastructure and services. We've been looking a lot at what's happening in industry around data mesh. And how does that look for research data mesh, a decentralized and distributed system that would harmonize services, not necessarily harmonizing data. I know that there's a lot of discussion about that, and consistent metadata might help. But really thinking about common APIs, common metadata models, digital identifiers, indexing approaches, and working with some of our big platforms like the CRDC and the Biodata Catalyst Common Fund Data Ecosystem. Of course, we're going to enhance Researcher Auth Services. That's really showing to be a very valuable activity across NIH, but we want to use smart tokens that aid in communication across and within what we would think of as a data mesh, allowing for accountability and auditing. And then, of course, greater data availability. Probably we'll be looking at hybrid data compute infrastructures as we instantiate strides, but also think beyond strides. You'll probably see some new language because we didn't talk about artificial intelligence in the prior strategic plan, but now we'll really want to talk about artificial intelligence, improving data computation and modeling and infrastructures for AI and ML, how to increase the efforts and develop tools for ethical AI is going to be a theme. There's a lot of talk about synthetic data sets, iterative model training. We want to think about social determinants of health and including those in models and training, and to support ICs to more effectively adopt AI approaches. You may see some additional language in terms of enabling fair data and trust repositories in our data management sharing policies, developing open standards and schema, thinking about common data elements and beyond common data elements, maybe tools that would support structured and standardized metadata and annotation, maybe minimum standards and schemas for APIs. That might be something that's of interest. And you'll hear a new section that we didn't include last time around research-inspired data science. I'm really excited about this. This is a hard one, but we'll want to really bring in real-world data, social determinants of health data into our clinical data. We'll want to think about ways in which we can adopt and things that are happening in other parts of HHS or other agencies, such as standards that ONC are developing. And you might hear a little bit about, actually, you'll probably hear a lot more about enhancing fast healthcare interoperable resources and enhancing FHIR for cohort discovery. You might hear a little bit about creating a software ecosystem supporting a culture of software development by bringing communities together to talk about software sustainability, maybe even metrics and best practices for software sustainability. You may also hear about new cutting-edge software technologies, developing tools and workflows to automate and map data elements, or novel passive data collection technologies. And let's see, you might hear a little bit about strengthening a broader community of data scientists. We really do want to instantiate a multi-disciplinary and diverse data workforce that can accelerate our research. So you'll probably hear more about opportunities for training and developing training modulars. We would like to partner with our ICs to provide additional training resources to their platforms like Anvil or BioData Catalyst. Mm-hmm. Enhancing training and data management and FAIR is going to be a big element that we're going to tackle pretty early on. And then, I have a passion to really think about enhancing training in underrepresented and under-resourced communities. Mm. So there'll be a lot of activities. We hope to get an RFI of the strategic plan fully written as a draft out in the fall. And then the plan is that everything will be finalized sometime in very early 2023.
Wow, that's amazing, Susan. my head is hurting just from listening to all the initiatives we're going to have going on and the work that's getting done. I think a lot of people also don't realize that the NIH shares all this out to the community so that all of the innovations and work that you're doing, the public can use and share those best practices out to industry and in academic settings and whatever. So this is all part of what the government funded work does for us.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's just been such a wonderful joy to work at NIH and to work on data science. I know that for the outside of NIH community, it seems like things move slowly, but there's always a lot going on here and a lot of planning and thinking as we move activities forward. So I'm looking forward to the next 5 years in data science here at NIH and engaging you, Stan, and BioTeam and the rest of our colleagues to really make the magic happen in data science.
That's amazing, Susan. Thank you so much for sharing this last 3-year journey. I'd love to have you back once the plan is close to being finalized to share with our community exactly what we can expect over the next 5 years, over the next plan, and what things are definitely in the neck we should be looking for. So thank you so much for sharing all that experience with us, Susan. And it's really been a pleasure having you as a guest.
Thank you so much, Dan. I look forward to the next discussion when you'll hear more about the things that we're doing.
I look forward to it, Susan. Take care.
You too. Thanks.
If you enjoyed this conversation, we'd love for you to leave us a review and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you for joining us.